Hey gang, I got an offer for you today from LinkedIn. As business to business marketers, your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles are long and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn ads empower marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. On LinkedIn, you have direct access to build relationships with decision makers. Of the 875 million users on the network, 180 million are senior level executives. 10 million are C-level executives. You will also be able to drive results with targeting and measuring with their tools built specifically for B2B. And best of all, they work. Audiences exposed to brand messages on LinkedIn are 6 times more likely to convert. LinkedIn ads also rank number 1 for security, community, and ad experience as part of the Business Insider's Digital Trust Study. Make B2B marketing everything it can be and get a $100 credit. It's a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. It's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Enigma. This is Seth Goldstein. For our episode, I think we're the lucky 13th episode of Entrepreneur's Enigma.
Nice. I get the 13 one. Oh,
you get
crap.
The 13 one. Oh, I should have warned you about that. Yeah. I'm with the ever amazing, very humorous, ever talented Jason Falls, straight from Louisville, Kentucky.
That's
Kentucky,
right.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. And you pronounced Louisville right. That's good.
I've practiced that. Louisville.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
There you go.
You can keep your mouth shut and do it.
Yep. Louisville.
Louisville. You do it better than I do. I'm a Yankee. What can I say? So.
That's okay.
Anyhow, so Jason and I have known each other for, I don't know, 10 years or so.
Yep.
We first met way back when at the AWeber, which is an email service provider's first Ascend conference.
Mm-hmm.
Jason was the keynote speaker. I think he just done the No Bullshit Marketing book.
Yep.
Is that what it's called? No Bullshit?
Yeah, No Bullshit Social Media. Yeah.
That's social media. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I remember that. I still have pictures of me on stage at that conference. They took some really good pictures and let me use them. So it's good stuff.
It was at the Westin on, I think, 15th, right below Broad. I grew up in and around Philadelphia, so I know where it was exactly. So.
Yeah, that I don't remember, but I'll take your word for it.
Exactly. No, it was fun. It was a good time, and we've stayed in touch. His new book, I don't have it with me. I have it on Kindle. So if you can hold it up. Here it is. Oh, there it is.
Behind me.
There you go.
There you go.
It's Winfluence, reframing influencer marketing to ignite your brand. It's an awesome book. I mean, it's easy to read. The highlighting in my Kindle is crazy. It's like every page is like, you find tidbits, and then of course in Kindle they have their underlines as well. So you're like, that's a good point too. Yeah. So I'm going back and I'm like reading through it again. I'm like, whoa, I pretty much underlined the whole book.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I try to, when I write these things, I hope they're useful for people, and I hope a lot of people get good stuff out of it. So it's good to hear you liked it, and hopefully your viewers here will pick up a copy and like it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Please go over there. You can find it over jasonfalls.com, and you can get it pretty much all over there. I'll put that little ticker up there. There, put a little, check out Winfluence, and there's also a podcast.
Yeah.
Which is fun too.
Yeah. I launched the podcast in September of last year. So it's almost a year old now, as really just kind of a marketing companion for the book. Mm-hmm. But I've had a lot of fun having, everyone from, brand managers to company CEOs to the software vendor folks to, influencers themselves on the show. And every week I learn something new, and it's just a great way to kind of explore different perspectives on influence marketing and get smarter about it. This past yesterday's episode with Colin Jeffries, who is a VP of marketing at Brightview, which is a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center in the Midwest. he's got this really cool perspective on, building influence, not necessarily using online influencers, which is kind of the point of the book in a way. I kind of underline, if we take the R off of it and call it influence marketing instead of influencer marketing, now all of a sudden our perspective opens up and we can think, okay, I've got to influence an audience. That might happen on YouTube or Instagram. But it might also happen with, local community efforts and lobbyists and lots of other people. So great, just learning new stuff every day and having really deep conversations about the industry. So the podcast is a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a great podcast. It's a must listen. Everyone should check it out. That you can get that over at jasonfalls.com. And so, what inspires you to write this book? I mean, I know what inspired me to read it, but other than being Jason's book, I mean, like I know why I wanted to read it, because it has a different take on influencer marketing.
Yeah. There were two things going on at the time. I started writing this thing in early 2019. I started writing in the spring. I started writing it, and there were two things going on at the time. First of all, there was lots of coverage in mainstream media about influencers, and it was all negative. It was the media talking about how they're superficial and all it is selfies, and they were talking about the ones who airbrushed clouds into their pictures on Instagram, and the ones who weren't doing anything effective. And because the mainstream media is where a lot of small business owners, as well as medium and large marketers and whatnot, get their information about these niche topics, a very negative portrait was being portrayed about influencers. If you're not in the marketing wheelhouse talking about this stuff every day, sort of marketing geeks like you and me, a brand manager is not necessarily going to hear the whole story. So I knew that, because I spend my days working with influencers that are very effective at moving the needle, at driving sales, at creating brand lift and brand awareness, and so on and so forth. So that little sliver of the peace sign duck lips crowd, the ones that I think are superficial and don't have a lot of substance to them, that's a very small sliver of what's out there. So I wanted to promote the industry a bit. But then I also, at the same time, was working through influence marketing strategies with some clients at Cornett. And we were doing things that other people weren't doing. We were laying influencers on top of each other for different types of campaigns. We were triangulating things. We were doing a lot of offline influence, which is where that idea came in of, well, wait a minute, it's not just about Instagram and YouTube. We can also use people of influence, or influential people, not just influencers. And so those ideas kind of collided, and I said, okay, I've got to start putting some ideas together. That, coupled with the fact that my agent called me and said, all right, it's been 8 years. It's about time you write another book, because this is crap. You need to write something.
And you're like, oh, publish or perish.
So he kind of
academia, but exactly.
He kind of stuck his foot up my butt a little bit on it. So I got motivated, and that's how it all kind of came together.
That's awesome. So you're currently working at Cornett as you're the chief.
I'm the
washer
senior influence strategist, I think, is my official title. But I just solve problems. It doesn't matter if it's influencer marketing or if it's SEO or PR challenges, content marketing for our clients. So I'm kind of in that owned and earned space, and I solve problems. That's kind of what I do.
Exactly. You're kind of an intrapreneur in the space,
because, a little bit.
I mean, and you've done the entrepreneur side of things. You do public speaking. You write books, for crying out loud. I mean, what inspired you to get into the? I mean, before we went live, I think it was before we went live. You were saying you went into radio because you did. You said you had to actually audition to read your own book on Audible, and you had to say, look, I have a radio background. Like, what's the origin story of Jason here?
Sure. So I've always been in some form of communications, or I guess performance, if you will, which is why I like podcasting so much. When I was 14 years old, and I'll give my mom a lot of credit for this, but not quite the way you think. So when I was 14 years old, it was the summer before my freshman year of high school, and my mother started leaving me lists of chores to do every day. And I didn't want to do her chores. So she said, well, if you don't want to do chores, get a job. So I walked up the hill. I lived in Eastern Kentucky at the time. So I walked up the hill to the radio station, which was basically up on the hill behind my house. And I marched in the door and I said, I want to be a DJ. And they knew me. They knew who I was. They knew my mom. She had been the editor of the local newspaper. So it wasn't like it was
so
just,
communications is in the blood.
Yeah, it wasn't like a cold, just some kid walked in off the street. They knew who I was and they knew my mom. But I said, I want to be a DJ. And they said, well, go in the studio and read this little AP wire copy script and we'll see what you sound like. And I put on my best fake radio voice and and they said, well, you can start Friday. And so
wow,
in high school, in high school, I worked at the radio station. I did, a couple of weekend shifts, not a whole lot of heavy lifting, but I eventually, I loved working at the radio station so much. And I loved being behind the microphone and performing that I just got good. I started practicing and I would take advice from the engineer and the other DJs and whatnot. And I just figured out how to do it. Eventually I started doing play-by-play for my local high school football and basketball teams. I started doing sideline reporting on some other games. And then when I was 16 years old, 2 years later, one day the morning show guy at the radio station I was working at just didn't show up one day. And they called me and said, hey, can you come in and do a shift? And I'm like, yeah. And so for the summer before my senior year or junior year in high school, I was the morning drive time guy.
Oh, so, wow. A high school student.
Yeah. So I did that in high school and I loved that whole world. So I went to college and got a degree from Morehead State University in Kentucky in radio, TV communications. Mm-hmm. And then while I was in school, I wrote sports stories for the local newspaper and then got hired by the sports information department, the PR guys for college athletics, to kind of help them work. And so I ended up, my master's degree from West Virginia University is actually in sport management, sports administration. And I thought I was going to, pursue that sort of college athletics PR, maybe one day be an athletic director, maybe. And I did that actually for 15 years. I was a college athletics PR guy for 15 years and had a little bit of a network broadcasting stint there for a couple years in between before I actually got back into the PR world. Mm-hmm. But I did that. And I worked at a lot of smaller colleges as the internet was emerging. So I learned how to build the athletic website and manage content. And I was playing on forums and message boards, trying to figure out how to get more people to pay attention to my student athletes and our teams. And so when I got out of that in 2005-ish, when my son was born, I was working at an ad agency and someone said, I need help figuring out how to use blogs and social networks and stuff. I don't know what it is. And I was like, well, I know what all that stuff is. That's all I've been doing for the last 10 years. And so I immediately connected the dots between what I did for fun over here playing on the internet and what my clients needed to be able to connect their message to their consumers.
Oh, that's awesome.
And literally within 9 months, I went from a PR account manager to director of social media to VP for interactive and just kind of blossomed from there. I just grabbed the bull by the horns and didn't fall off, I guess.
There you go. Wow. So very ambitious. You had to go and, especially as a 14-year-old, that takes some ads.
Yeah, it took a little bit of moxie, but I mean, I grew up in a small town and I was a, obnoxious attention getter anyway. So it was the one place.
Very much an introvert, right? Very much an introvert.
It was the one place in town I could probably work and it made sense.
That's awesome. Yeah,
so it was fun. I had a good time doing it. I thought I was a hell of a lot more impressive than I was, but
did you have was your voice like it is now, or was it still very high pitched?
Well, no, it wasn't high pitched. I had the same tone, but I didn't have the polish. And I grew up for your viewers out there. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky where the Hatfield and McCoy feud was. So a lot of people I grew up with, they talk like this, they're kind of Southern and lazy and twangy in the way they talk. So I had to practice and rehearse to get that out of my system. I still have a little bit of twang, but it's like cute twang. Like there's a few words that make me sound a little country, but I don't sound terrible country.
You sound like you're from Louisville. You sound like you're a suburban country.
There you go. But so I actually competed in speech and drama in high school and worked on my broadcasting. I would get up every morning as a 15, 16-year-old, and I would get the newspaper and I would read the stories out loud while I ate my breakfast because I was practicing enunciation. I was practicing rhythm and tone, pace, because I had to read those news stories on the air later. And so I just practiced. And it was one of those things that I eventually got to the point to where I sounded pretty good on the air. I knew how to breathe right. I knew how to control how I talk. I knew how to, talk at length ad nauseum when the record player doesn't fire or the reel-to-reel machine breaks while you're talking. You don't stop. You keep talking. So
as you're fixing things, you're still talking. You're like,
exactly.
Why is this not working?
You've got to learn when you're on the air on a radio station. You've got to learn that if you shut up, all of a sudden that's dead air, and that's not good. So you just keep talking until you can, put something in the cart machine, play a commercial or something until you can take a breath.
And then you go, oh.
Exactly. So I learned how to do all that and be, kind of a broadcaster, which is actually kind of the front end of my career. And now I don't know that I'm on the back end, but I'm some sort of midway. But now I've come back full circle to doing podcasts and live streams like this and whatnot. And so it proved to be pretty good training ground for what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's interesting how everything, you look at the internet, the first half of the internet, the first half of what we know as the consumer internet, we'll call it that, was, between, I would say, what did you say? It was like 94, 96-ish.
Yeah.
Through like 2011, then everything is sort of turned upside down. I mean, there's books out there that say that's when people started saying, it wasn't as broadcast, as more conversational.
Yeah, I think in terms of social media and people actually connecting on the internet, you're right. Sort of phase one, I think, came up to 2009, I would argue, and the advent of the iPhone. And when smartphones began to be in everybody's hands, now all of a sudden the internet was different. Facebook was there and Twitter was there and LinkedIn and YouTube were there, but they didn't really get that gasoline on the fire effect until everybody could do it from the palm of their hand. And once they did,
I remember SMSing to Twitter.
Mm-hmm, yep. Once they did, once that happened and everybody had smartphones, the social networks really started to take off and build value and find ways to, monetize what they were doing a little bit better. And the web, the social web as we know it, started to form about 2009, 2010. And then I don't think it's reached its full maturity yet, but it's probably in its teenage years now.
Oh, it's definitely acting like it.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, wow, it's acting like it.
Well, and this is a whole nother rabbit hole conversation, but I think we're starting to deal with the negative repercussions of what happens when everybody gets to be a publisher and everybody can voice their opinion and thinks their opinion matters. Because now you've got just noise from everybody. And then of course, there's the whole, fact checking and fake news and all that kind of stuff that's, it's a little bit of a Pandora's box that we've opened up. Hopefully we can figure out a way as a society to figure that out in the next few years.
Hopefully. So your last book was the no bullshit social media. And
that was the first book. And then Winfluence is the latest book. And then in between I had the Rebel's Guide to Email Marketing with DJ.
That's it, yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's more than two. I was like, there's more than two, but apparently your agent was like, all right, you got to keep it going. Exactly. So people can go over to jasonfalls.com and get more information about the podcast. You're very active on Twitter, right?
Yeah. I'm still active on Twitter, Facebook, a little bit on Instagram. I don't do as much on Instagram as other people. I'm actually pretty active on LinkedIn too.
I love what LinkedIn's doing now. I mean, they're really grabbing the bull by the horns. I mean,
they did a really nice job of sort of slowly rolling out LinkedIn Live and giving access to a certain number of people. I was fortunate enough to get early access to LinkedIn Live. And so my Digging Deeper show, which I do for Cornett, started out as something different, but when I did start doing it on LinkedIn, it kind of blew up. I had a really nice viewership there early on because I was, one of the few people doing it.
There was no noise.
Yeah. No, it's leveled out now because there's a lot more noise in the stream with live video there. But I like what LinkedIn has done lately in terms of empowering content creators, prioritizing video, moving some of the newsletter features and blog features into the forefront. There's a lot more thought leaders now, like Charlene Lee, who are doing their email newsletters based on LinkedIn content. Yeah, and so I think they're doing a really nice job of building that sort of B2B business environment.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get in on the newsletter part. I just discovered that I had LinkedIn Live on my personal, on my profile. So we're on that. Hi, everybody. But But the newsletter thing, I'm like itching for that one. I'm like that looks really cool to kind of just be able to not take everyone's email address and put it outside of LinkedIn and spam everyone, because that's like a big no. You don't do that. Yeah. But being able to use your graph and share stuff out to people who want to follow you,
Yeah, it's good. I think we're going to start to see also in especially in the world of influence marketing over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. I think we're going to start to see a little bit of the pendulum swing back to where content creators are owning that channel. That they're going to do more blogs and email content.
I love that.
Than they would necessarily put all their eggs in Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or TikTok's basket. I think you're going to start to see content creators diversify where they're publishing, not necessarily shut anything down. But I think because of the manipulation and the changes that the Facebooks of the world are bringing to the table of trying to get their piece of the monetization pie of these influencer relationships, I think you're going to start to see influencers start to go, wait a minute, I don't want to rely on Facebook for connection to my audience. I need to recruit my audience over here into an environment I can control.
Owned media.
Exactly. And LinkedIn is doing a better job of letting that happen. Now, LinkedIn's not a smart channel for B2C type influencers, but LinkedIn's serving as a nice little model of let's empower them, not try to monetize them immediately.
Absolutely. And I keep on telling my friends, do you happen to know Shannon McGill?
I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah, she's very big on blogging on the platforms. And I'm like, Shannon, you need to get a blog. I will build you a blog. Because this is rented media, not owned media. And she actually is my co-host in my other podcast, Digital Marketing Dive.
Yeah, so, that's where I know her from.
Yeah, exactly. So she's we're going to get her on this show as well. But Jason, thank you for coming on. This has been so much fun, just catching up with you. And the book, like I said, is fantastic. You can get it everywhere, pretty much. Hold that book up again. There it is. And
beautiful Winfluence. Forward by David Meerman Scott. That's a good one.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very good forward. And like I said, it's an easy read, which is nice. It's not like it's not textbook. I think it should be a textbook. I think people should be reading that in business school. I think business school should be reading more of the easier reads, less of the dry text, because I think you're going to retain it more.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and I definitely think it's worthwhile for anybody who wants to really get a grasp on how to approach influence marketing strategically. There is one chapter devoted to here's the how-tos, right? But it's not a how-to book. It's more of a strategic thinking book, which was what my previous books were. They weren't about how to do email marketing or how to do social media.
But that dates it too.
So yeah, it's more about how to think about it, so that regardless of what the tools are 10 years from now, hopefully this will still be pretty relevant. The No Bullshit Social Media that Eric Deckers and I wrote in 2011, so 10 years ago, is still 50 copies a month, or popping off, because we didn't write it about MySpace and Friendster and whatever. We wrote it about social media thinking.
Exactly. That's relevant. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So everyone can also subscribe to the show at entrepreneursenigma.com. That's going to be actually rolled into Goldstein Media's website eventually when the redesign happens. Almost there, but you can still go to entrepreneursenigma.com. Not the easiest words to spell. I realized after I came up with it, because I have a little doozy thingy here. The text expands it because I can never spell entrepreneur. I think it's a French word, and there's too many E's and U's, and forget it. But it's a good word, so I'm using it. So, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. And this will be made into a podcast, so I'll make sure when it comes out as well.
Seth, I appreciate you having me on, man. Let me know when it comes out, and we'll make sure everybody knows about it.
Awesome. All right, take care, everyone.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Dave Delaney hosts a great podcast called The Nice Podcast. Dave, Tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Thanks for asking. The Nice Podcast is all about helping leaders improve the way they communicate with their team members, with their prospects, with their colleagues, everybody. So that's what it's all about.
Amazing. Where can people subscribe?
The places that you subscribe to podcasts normally. But you can also find the show at marketingpodcast.net, of course. And you can also visit nicepodcast.co.
You heard him, folks. Go subscribe.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.